Brandy, we're ready to start whenever you're ready to go. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Administrative Service Center here at El Paso Community College. Thank you all for coming, to those of you here in person tonight and those of you watching on Facebook Live. My name is Bob Moore. I'm the CEO of El Paso Matters, which is El Paso's nonprofit newsroom covering issues of importance to the community. And we're here tonight to talk about a really important issue for El Paso and really for the country and the world in recent years, which is the mental health challenges that are faced by high school students in particular. As we all know, we've talked a lot in recent years about mental health challenges all across the spectrum. It touches almost every aspect of life. And tonight we want to focus specifically on high school students and really talk about what all of us together can do to help students who may be facing challenges, and I think most importantly to try to destigmatize some of the issues around this. And my hope tonight is that each of us will leave with some new insights into the role that we can play. When I was meeting with our key sponsor tonight, Emergence Health Networks, Noreen Jaramillo told me about this idea that they're promoting of be the difference. And that phrase really struck me because it gives us all an opportunity to make a difference in these challenges. So I want to begin by thanking our sponsors, Emergence Health Network, El Paso Community College, our host tonight, and the Socorro Independent School District. This program would not have been possible without them. I will introduce our panelists after a video that I'd like to show. This video features these two wonderful people to my right, Gisela Lopez and her daughter Alice Cruz, talking about their experiences in working through challenges that Alice was facing, and really the wonderful story of her getting to a much better place and now being able to sit up here in front of a room of strangers and talk about this, which takes an amount of courage I would not have had at that age. So congratulations. So we'll roll the video real quick as a way of kind of setting the stage for our conversation.
I've been with them for about a year already. They helped me understand my emotions and how to deal with them. Getting help is super important because
fue muy comunicativa conmigo y yo decía, no, pues sí, algo está pasando. Y luego sí, ella siempre le ha gustado mucho comer y no comía, y le daba lo que más le gustaba y lo dejaba. Entonces decía, no, le digo, Alice, ¿estás bien? Y ella me decía que sí, pero yo sabía que no. Luego empezaron a haber llamadas de la escuela y decía, no, pues algo no está pasando bien. Entonces dormía mucho también, se la quería pasar dormida, no quería salir de su cuarto. A ella le gusta mucho convivir con toda la familia y no convivía con la familia, no quería ir a lugares a comer o a la casa de su tía, y le gustaba mucho ir a casa de su tía. Entonces dije que pues no, algo estaba pasando ahí, algo que no me gustaba. Luego después hubo un incidente Y entonces ya fue cuando ya me hablaron de este programa y ya pues empezamos a venir aquí. Eso que es bien importante buscar ayuda cuando nosotros vemos estas situaciones, porque el programa nos ayuda y nos da herramientas para poder lidiar con estas condiciones médicas. Definitivamente es una condición médica, no tiene nada, es igual como si uno tiene diabetes, uno tiene alta presión, es lo mismo, o sea, no es nada malo y eso nos ayuda a entenderlo, porque a veces cuando empezamos con estas situaciones con los adolescentes, nosotros tratamos de no ver lo importante cuando en realidad sí es una bandera roja cualquier cosita que nosotros veamos diferente en ellos, y eso nos ayuda, ellos nos ayudan a aprender a identificar esas banderas rojas y nos da los conocimientos que necesitamos para poder lidiar con esto. Realmente este programa ha hecho una diferencia enorme. La verdad, al principio, pues uno como padre, cuando suceden estas situaciones, se preocupa mucho y piensa lo peor. Y a veces, pues con tantos comentarios de otra gente que tal vez no está informada, dicen es que no va a pasar, la depresión no pasa. Y sí, si buscamos la ayuda bien, sí, y este programa la verdad que sí es una bendición, porque sí nos ayuda, sí le ha ayudado mucho. Alice ha tenido una diferencia al 100%, gracias a Dios. Y sí es un programa que toda la comunidad debería de tener conocimiento que existe, porque sí nos ayuda a entender a los adolescentes, a nuestros adolescentes, y a evitar muchas tragedias después.
I honestly really thank them, because if it wasn't for them, I honestly wouldn't have been here. I'm going to UTEP, so I see like that as a new chapter in my life. I definitely think that it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be full of new experiences and new things.
So Gisela and Alice touched on so many important things in that video that I want to use to help frame our conversation today. But first I want to introduce the other two panelists with me today. To my immediate left is Julie Terrell, who you also saw in the video, who's been working with Alice and Gisela. She's here to help kind of support the conversation. Obviously, she's not here to talk about the details of her work with them. Also, Gisela prefers to answer in Spanish, and so Julie will help us translate as necessary here. And then we're also joined by Krista Wingate, who's the Deputy Chief of Child and Adolescent Services at Emergence Health Network. She currently oversees multiple child and adolescent outpatient programs, including school-based mental health services. Krista has been with Emergence for the last 10 years. For the benefit of the people here in the audience, I think most of you saw as you came in, Emergence has a table over here that gives you some initial access to lots of resources. I encourage you after the event ends to feel free to talk to them. If you're in need of assistance, they can help direct you. Emergence provides a broad array of mental health and substance abuse services, ranging from adolescents up to senior citizens. So the important thing to know is that help is available in the community when we face these challenges. And as I said earlier, I think we want to talk about how we all can impact this. And I want to start by asking Krista to basically discuss the scope of the mental health challenges for high school students in our community. Yeah, how many kids are affected, and what kinds of illnesses are you seeing?
So I think at Emergence Health Network, we serve a lot of our community. And so we do have our school-based programs. And so focusing on that a little bit, something I want to touch on is we actually do surveys to students that are receiving school-based mental health services, as well as students who are not. And recently we did a survey of over 3,000 students across multiple high schools between 3 districts. And what we saw was the common thing that students and teenagers wanted more information about and to talk about was anxiety. So it was really interesting to see that one of the top choices and things that they wrote down was, hey, I want to learn how to cope with my anxiety better. So that's definitely a problem that is affecting, I think, high schoolers across the districts, across our community. And the second one was actually learning how to improve their self-esteem. So we have some that chose wanting to learn how to improve self-esteem, wanting to also have healthy relationships. So I think it's pretty evident that there's just an array of, a very large scope of the challenges that these students and adolescents experience in high schools.
I want to turn the conversation now to Gisela and Alice, and part of the video addressed this, and it's probably the most important step that has to take place, where you have to spot the problem, acknowledge the problem, and then work together to address the problem. And I was struck in watching the video where Gisela was talking to Alice, and you would just say, I'm okay, I'm okay. And Gisela knew that something was wrong. So Gisela, what was it that made you aware that this was something more than just, the thing all boys and girls face when at one time or another? What made you aware that your daughter was facing some challenges that you needed some professional help to address?
Yo pienso que lo que el indicador fue eso de que ella dormía mucho. Ella le gusta jugar mucho soccer desde los 4 años y no quería ir a sus prácticas, no quería jugar, no quería salir de su cuarto, se encerraba, no comía, lloraba. Algo también que no lo comenté en el video, pero algo también que empecé a ver en ella era que se cortaba los brazos. Entonces eso sí también fue algo así como que bien fuerte para uno como papá, porque dices, ¿por qué está pasando esto? O sea, yo pensaba que estaba bien, pero realmente no sabía por lo que mi hija estaba pasando en su mente. Entonces fue algo que pues yo dije, no, sí, algo está mal.
Do you want to briefly summarize that? Because it's really important information right there.
Yeah, I think that she says that she started to notice all the different symptoms that are involved with feeling the way Alice was feeling. She was isolating herself. She was not wanting to eat. She had played soccer since she was a 4-year-old, and she loved to play soccer, and she was no longer interested in playing. And just her behaviors were very different from what she was previously. And she said that the one really important thing that she didn't mention in the video was that she noticed that Alice was cutting herself. And that once she saw that, that was the alarm for her. And that's when she knew there was something really not right.
And Alice, first of all, I want to thank you again for being willing to talk about this. It's not an easy thing to talk about. You kept assuring your mom, I'm okay, I'm okay. What made you realize that maybe you did need a little bit of help? What got you to that point where you said, okay, I'm not okay?
So I started off with crying a lot. I knew that something was wrong because I love to eat, honestly, and I was not eating at all. Like, my mom gave me pasta or my favorite foods, and I totally just threw it to the side. And so that's when I noticed that something was wrong.
So when you finally sought help, talk us through what that looked like. How first of all, how long was your journey after you began to seek help, and how did you work your way through all of this? And you don't have to talk about very intimate details, but just give people an idea of how you got to where you are today.
So it started when I was 16 years old, and so from there it's been about 3 years. So I feel like it's been a journey, definitely, but now, I mean, I'm here, and it all happened because of my therapist, of my psychologist, my psychiatrist, and I feel like it's all because of them. I also definitely put some part to it, but I feel like they helped me a lot, and if anybody is going through what I went through, I feel like they definitely need to seek help, because it's something that anybody they could go through, and something that if you need the help for it, you need to get it before something tragic happens.
We talk a lot about stigma and sort of the embarrassment or the shame of what is really an illness. Did you have that stigma too? Is that one of the reasons you had a hard time initially coming forward? And if you did, how did you overcome it?
I don't think I did because my sister went through the same thing, but I feel like a lot of men do have, especially men, have this stigma, and they think that, no, you're crazy, and like, this is wrong, you're not mentally ill, or like, no, it's not okay to go through like help or whatever I went through, and I feel like that's wrong. I mean, it's like any other type of illness that you're gonna have. You're gonna have to take medications for it, or you're gonna have to go through therapy to recover from it, and it's totally fine. Like, whatever you're going through, it's fine.
And Gisela, one of the things that parents will experience is that, oh, I must have done something wrong that my child is having these problems, which is not the reason kids have the problems. Did you ever feel that way? And if you did, how did you work past that?
Sí, al principio sí decía, pues, o sea, yo pensaba, uno como padre a veces pues se enfoca en trabajar y en hacer todo y piensa que pues uno está haciendo todo bien, ¿verdad? Pero cuando pasó esta situación con mi hija sí pensé en que pues que hice mal, que es lo que estoy haciendo mal, porque a lo mejor no le estoy dando la atención necesaria, pero realmente no solo fue a lo mejor por las situaciones vividas en la casa, en la vida familiar, sino también en su escuela, muchas situaciones que ella estaba viviendo que realmente uno como padre no pregunta o no se informa o no sabemos lo que está pasando. Entonces, pues pues algo de todo, pero no fue. Realmente uno como padre a veces sí piensa que es nuestra culpa, pero no es nuestra culpa.
Do you want to translate that real briefly?
Yes. So she mentions that, you know, as a parent, how you start to look at yourself and you start to wonder, like, what am I doing wrong? She said we as parents oftentimes get focused on our jobs and, you know, on the things that, you know, the responsibilities that we have, and that she started to wonder, like, is it something that I'm doing? But she said that what she came to discover is that it is the series of events, Alice's experiences at school, at home, in all the environments that she's in, all took a role in getting her where she was at. And so she says, Mom says that she doesn't take responsibility for it because it was a whole chain of events that also occurred at the same time.
Krista and Julie, I'm assuming that that's the kind of thing you hear from parents pretty regularly. What advice do you have for parents who may be feeling that sense of stigma? How do they move past it, and how do those of us who may be around people going through those challenges kind of help convince them that this is not their fault, this is something that, like any other illness, needs help?
Yeah, I think Alice said it best. If you need the help and it's affecting you, your brain is one of the most important organs that we have, and so we need to be okay with that too. And seeking the help shouldn't be anything that is looked at in a negative way at all. It should be handled just like cardiac disease, or like she mentioned, diabetes. All of those things affect us, but definitely your mental wellness is something that's so important.
Krista?
Yeah, I think it's really important for parents to also acknowledge that they are so much more than a parent. They're so much more than a caregiver. And I think Missy Sella, she says it so well, is that taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture and understanding that it's not a direct cause of something that the parent or the caregiver has done. And I think that takes a lot of courage to do that. And I think that's a really hard thing to do. And I think it can be even more challenging if a parent or a caregiver doesn't have the support to be able to take a step back and look at that bigger picture. And so a lot of time that contributes to a barrier to accessing services or wanting to seek out the services, because then that brings the shame to the parent, the shame to the family. And so sometimes it's easier to say, hey, you know what, I'm just gonna pretend this isn't a problem, or pretend that it's something that'll go away by itself. And if you don't have somebody to say, hey, you know what, there's something else going on here. Or maybe if the parent's not able to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, that's when things can happen that really hurt families and hurt our community.
Krista, let's kind of take a step forward then, and the parent sees that something's not right. They feel that it's not right. They have to talk with their child about that to kind of get a better sense of things, and then to kind of start on the road to seeking help. How do they begin that conversation? And maybe, as importantly, what should they not do as they begin that conversation?
First of all, I think it's acknowledging that these conversations are really tough. And so knowing that you're preparing to go and talk to your adolescent or your child about something that you know is going to feel uncomfortable, you know it's maybe not going to feel so natural, especially if you're not used to doing it. So one of the first things I always like to recommend is for the parent to just take a pause. So ask yourself, are you in the right headspace to have this conversation at this time? Sometimes whether you're in the right headspace or not, as a parent, you're just going to have to do it depending on the circumstances. But trying to give yourself some grace and say, hey, you know what, I had a really long day at work. I had something come up with another kid. Maybe today's not the day to have the conversation. So I think things to avoid or not to do when you're going to tackle some tough conversations is try not to do it when you're feeling burnt out. Try not to do it when you had a really long day, because then it's going to be really hard to pay attention and maybe take advantage of being able to be in a space with your child, with your teenager, to have a tough conversation. And so one of the things I always like to recommend, and it's really something easy to think about, is listen and have the conversation with love. So listening with love, and you just use LUV. So L is listen, so take a step back, listen. Take the time to say, hey, we're going to take some time, you and me. It's whether it's going to be after school, maybe it's before school, but listening and being intentional about listening to what your teen has to say about the conversation you're having is really important. You is understand, so trying to put yourself in your kiddo's shoes. So trying to say, hey, you know what, maybe I remember things when I was a teenager, or I've experienced similar things that maybe my kid's going through. Let me try to step back and understand, rather than being angry, rather than being upset. And V is for validate. So acknowledge, say, hey, you know what, those sound like some pretty rough feelings you're going through. Hey, you know what, crying, you know, a lot of times when you come home from school, it makes me feel sad too, because I don't see you hanging out with your friends like you did before. So being able to approach the conversations with an open mind, taking a second to pause, making sure you can be present in the moment. Those are some really good tips to try to tackle those tough conversations.
Gisela and Alice, what advice would you give to parents and children about having these conversations? Does what Krista says make sense to you? Anything that you would want to add to that?
Yo pienso que es bien importante hacerle cuando vamos a tener esta conversación con nuestros jóvenes que están pasando por estas situaciones difíciles. Es bien importante hacerles saber que ahí vamos a estar con ellos. No importa lo que pase, vamos a estar con ellos, vamos a salir juntos de esta situación, de esta condición médica que ellos tienen, y siempre vamos a estar acompañándolos y escuchándolos, que no se sientan solos y que sepan que ahí vamos a estar con ellos.
So what Mom is saying is that she thinks it's really important when we start to have those conversations with our children that they understand first and foremost that it is something that they are going to walk with together. And that she said that she made it clear that they're going to stay through it together, they're going to power through it together, and that they'll come through it at the end together. So I think they have shown a wonderful example of that also.
Alice, anything you want to add?
I think it's really important to understand that your kid might not want to tell you anything at the beginning. So it's really important to keep in mind that starting from the beginning, they have to be able to trust you. So you have to tell them, okay, so you could trust me, you could tell me whatever you need to tell me. It's important for you to talk to them as a parent, understand that anything that they're going through, you might not understand as well. So you need to put yourself in their shoes. So if anything hard is going through them, or if they're having a hard time in school, just talk to them, and honestly, like, it'll help them so much.
And Alice, what advice would you give to your fellow students about trusting their parents? I mean, and having these conversations, because it's not easy. So what advice would you give them?
I feel like just trust your mom, your dad. They're there to help you. They're not there to judge you. They're your supporters in anything that you need. Especially, I understand that because my mom is my main supporter, and she helps me in anything that I want, anything that I need. She'll be there for me. So I truly believe that parents have that in them, and you could talk to them, and anything that you need them to do for you, they'll do it for you.
Alice, talk a little bit about the academic path you're on now. I should have introduced where you went to high school and all of that. So talk a little bit about your academic journey and how that might have been affected by some of this too.
So right now I go to Austin High School, and I'm number 4 from like all my school, and that really impacted my mental health, impacted my school, because I wasn't dropping my grades, but I was definitely not communicating with my teachers. I wasn't doing like not well in school, but like trying to communicate with my friends and stuff like that. That was just dropping. All of that was gone. So I feel like now, looking back to it, it's really important to keep in mind that you might just feel like you're going through something horrible, but it's gonna go, and it's gonna go past it, and you're just gonna be fine, because you're gonna get the help that you need. And this is why it's important to keep in mind that you also need to get the help, and that no matter what, anybody's gonna be there for you. You could ask a school counselor, you could ask your teacher, and they'll get you the help that you need.
So, by the way, really cool being number 4 in your class. You kind of let that one slide by pretty quickly there. What do you plan to do after you graduate from high school?
So I want to go to UTEP, and I want to study social work and have a minor in Chicano studies, because I want to work with immigrants. Right now I work with immigrants in the shelter, and I see that they need so much help, honestly, and I feel like we could support a little more help for them, and they've gone through so much that I feel like just helping them and putting that little bit of extra support for them is really important. So yeah, that's what I want to do.
That's pretty cool. Krista, one of the things that you and I had a conversation last week, and one of the things that came to mind as we were talking about everything is kind of the advice that you get from flight attendants on airplanes, like when the masks drop, put your own mask on first, and then take care of your kid, because you have to protect yourself. So it strikes me that when a child is going through mental health challenges, that's also incredibly stressful for the parent too. So what should parents be doing to protect themselves during all of this and make sure that they're staying healthy themselves? And Julie, you're certainly welcome to weigh in on this too.
I think a big advantage of not just services within Emergence Health Network, but other community partners that provide mental health services, is when your child is receiving services, you also have options to receive support and education and kind of reinforcement strategies of being able to understand and learn more about what your child is going through in therapy. And so when it comes to maybe not understanding things or having questions about things, reach out and ask. Ask the therapist, ask the caseworker, bring it up if you just don't know what a word is from that maybe even, your teen talked about after their session. Ask your teen, ask the therapist, like, hey, she told me that you did coping skills for this, but like, what does that actually mean? And I think the great thing is that if parents are open to talking with their child's therapist or maybe their child's caseworker about things, they can also learn a lot. And so I think it's really important to understand that they're not alone, that they don't have to go through everything that's happening with their child, with their family, by themselves. And so it's really important to make sure they have that mask on. And to do that, it takes a lot of looking inward. You know, it's a lot of work and it's not easy. And I think if we expect our kids to do it, I think as parents and as caregivers, we really have to do it for ourselves as well.
Julie, anything you wanted to add to that?
So I just want to add, so this family particularly, I know that when we would talk about certain things or we would introduce the possibility of a new skill or something that would help Alice, I know that she would go home and inform her mom and share with her mom everything that she had learned in session or in case management or with skills training. So mom got to hear everything Alice was learning as well. And so I think mom has learned some things that secondhand, but also anytime she was needing to talk to me, she reached out to me and I her, and keeping that line of communication open, and Alice keeping that line of communication open with her mom was really important.
Gisela, were you able to take care of yourself on this 3-year journey? And if you, another one of your children was also experiencing challenges too. So how do you take care of yourself?
She didn't take care of herself.
This is honest. That's good. That's okay too.
It's a work in progress.
She put her kids first.
I think that's natural for parents, right? You want to take care of your kids first, and sometimes you neglect yourself. So that's okay too. But any lessons you have to share, feel free.
Pues nada más quiero, ojalá y este en vivo sirva para la sociedad, para que ellos se quiten el estigma de lo que es una enfermedad mental, de que sepan que es una enfermedad como cualquier otra, así como uno se enferma, uno va al doctor y nos dan el tratamiento y seguimos, a veces necesitamos un tratamiento de por vida, pero vamos a estar bien, y la enfermedad mental es igual que cualquier otra condición médica, y que nosotros como padres tenemos la ayuda y los adolescentes también tienen la ayuda. Es bien importante, y sí, a veces sí es cierto, nosotros necesitamos cuidar de nosotros mismos y estar bien mentalmente y físicamente para cuidar de nuestros hijos, pero en mi caso sí me he enfocado mucho en lo que son mis hijas, pero ya habrá tiempo para mí.
So she says that it's really easy to put yourself aside, basically, but I think that her main thing that she wanted to emphasize is that mental health is just like any other health condition, and that it's important, and that she said that she's focused on her 2 children, her 2 daughters, and her family, and that she'll still at some point have time for herself.
Krista, as parents, as friends, as teachers, however we may interact with students or anybody else that might be facing challenges, what do we need to look for? And if we are concerned, how do we respond in a helpful way? And I know that's a way too broad of a question. And I think last week when we were talking, you mentioned sometimes there aren't symptoms, right? So how can we be supportive of people who might be facing challenges?
I think one of the really important things to point out is, and we mentioned it a little bit before talking about tackling tough conversations, is Tough conversations might be a little bit easier to tackle if you're having consistent conversations with your kids. And so when the time comes where maybe you need to tackle a tough subject and you need to bring up maybe some behavior change, or you need to bring up an attitude change that is out of the norm, right? Because all teenagers have some level of attitude and some strange behavior that we don't really know what's going on. But talk about it. So if you're not sure if it's of concern, sit down and ask your teen, like, hey, you know what? I noticed that you did this, or I noticed that your grades are dropping in this class. Like, what's going on? Are you chatting with your friends? Did you forget to turn in an assignment? So the more questions that we can ask, but the more that we can come off as, hey, I want to talk about it, rather than coming from, hey, you're going to get in trouble, or hey, you know, this is going to get taken away from you, it can really set a really great foundation, not just for tough conversations, but also to address and bring up things that might be of notice, and, you know, could be behavior changes. Again, I think it was really great in the video, sleeping very often, changing in eating habits, isolation, whether it's isolation from family, whether it's isolation from friends, you know, but in order to point and notice those things, you got to know your kid. So you got to have conversations. You got to sit down, you got to take some time, even if it's just, you know, a couple minutes, you know, out of the week. You got to sit down and know what to look for. But in order to do that, you've got to know your kids. So having those consistent conversations, whether it's, doesn't have to be about anything serious. It could just be about things that are going on in the world, things that you've noticed, how your day was. And so those conversations really lay the groundwork to be able to bring up and notice things that might be of concern.
I think there's a normal fear that I don't want to make things worse, so maybe I just won't talk about it. So how do we overcome those fears, and also how do we make sure we don't make it worse?
I think by being able to be honest as a parent that you have those fears. And so it's understanding that those fears are going to put walls up around you and around your family. And having those walls up could be really dangerous. And by saying, hey, you know what, I need to have this conversation, lean into support, get resources. The internet's a great thing. If you're not sure how to even start a conversation, you can just go to Google and look it up, you know, and there's going to be a bunch of different ideas on how to even start a conversation. You know, but I think you have to show up for yourself as a parent, and in order to show up for yourself, or rather to show up for your child or your teen. And so it's some hard truths, I think, to come to as a parent, and coming to those hard truths and talking about them is what I think can really pave the way for open and honest conversations that can then protect kids and ultimately help our community overall.
Alice, you know, do you have situations where you're with your friends and you see that somebody may be struggling? Do you feel comfortable saying, hey, are you okay? I mean, how does that work for you?
I feel like I've never had that happen to me, but if somebody was having a hard time, I definitely want to go help them and explain, like, it's okay what you're going through, like, you could talk to me, you could trust me, and if anything, you need anything, like, I'm here for you.
And Krista, let's talk about services that are available in the community. So, by the way, I want to tell the audience that's with us that we're going to have some time in a little bit for you to ask some questions too. So, start thinking about that a little bit. But talk a little bit about the services that are available, both with Emergence, which is the primary mental health and substance abuse provider in El Paso, but also at the school level, at other levels. How can people access the help they need?
Yeah, so we do have a centralized call center that is taking appointments. We have availability for all of our services. So we do general outpatient services for children and adolescents. So the youngest that we serve is 3, and we serve in some of our school-based programs up until their 20th or 21st birthday. So we are in a few different districts. We are within 5 EPISD schools. I know that's just a little drop in the bucket, but we're really proud of that partnership. And so the services that we offer are also community-based, which is really great. And I know there's other partners in the community that also offer those services. So when you think about barriers to accessing services, it's really important to try and take a look and see what's out there, and being able to sometimes come into us, where we are the local mental health authority, so sometimes we can connect families and community members with those services. If maybe we're not the best services for them, we can give them some resources and help them get linked up to something that might be more beneficial. But they're out there, and so we offer medication management, individual family therapy, and we offer the caseworker services. So our caseworker services is what's primarily community-based. So that's involving a caseworker going out to the home, meeting with the parents, meeting with the child or the teenager. So it's a really large array of services that we offer within our agency, but as well as we know our community partners offer as well.
Socorro ISD is one of our other sponsors tonight, and I know they have school-based help as well, although not directly tied to Emergence. So is the child's campus a good place to begin to access care?
Yeah, I think that could be a great place to access care and ask questions about resources. So reaching out to school counselor, reaching out to, again, internet is a wonderful thing. Everything is right there. There's some really great local resources, local websites for agencies that offer not just resources within their agency, but other ones as well. So looking on the internet, I think talking to school counselors, being able to maybe even word of mouth, being able to talk about services that maybe other friends or families are receiving, and looking into those services. But yeah, there's definitely multiple ways to be able to access our services.
One of the challenges in El Paso for any kind of health care is we never have enough providers to meet all of the needs, and especially when it comes to specialists. Talk a little bit about the situation with mental health in El Paso. Probably don't have enough therapists to meet all of the needs, but we find a way to try to make do, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Everybody wants therapy because therapy is awesome. So there is a shortage of counselors in El Paso, and so what we do with that, I think it's really important to look at what other services are out there that can be beneficial in different ways than therapy. And so, like I mentioned, when we have our caseworker services, that's a bachelor's level caseworker that went to school 4 years of psychology, and so they can also provide psychoeducation. They can, whether it's to the parent or whether it's to the child. And so as a community, we try to come together and say, okay, therapy is not available, but what else is there? And that's a really great service that I think is often overlooked because people want therapy, but sometimes going straight to therapy is not always the best thing. You got to lay some groundwork, maybe get some basic coping skills, some basic education, and then you can jump into therapy and really start tackling the tough stuff. Some people, it's just more challenging to start tackling the tough stuff right away. So I think that's why it's really important as a community we come together and we say, hey, I don't have this service, but I know somebody that does, and let me get you with them.
Before we go to audience questions, I want to talk about some communities with unique needs, unique mental health needs. I was struck by Alice very early on mentioning that she thought boys faced more of a stigma than girls. And so, I mean, just at that level, boys and girls face differing challenges. Then you have LGBTQ students who face their own challenges. So how does Emergence address the individual needs of those different communities, and what particular unique challenges are out there maybe that our audience should be aware of?
I think the unique challenges for some of these populations that maybe struggle with seeking services for mental health is that it's the stigma. So it's, hey, if I reach out and ask for help, what kind of help am I going to get? Is this person going to judge me? Are they going to tell me something that, I just don't agree with, or maybe something that's out of context or that's not correct? And so what we do at Emergence Health Network, we really pride ourselves in being trauma informed. So anybody that walks through that door, whether it's going to be our front office staff, whether it's going to be our therapist or our caseworker, you're going to encounter somebody who's received some level of trauma informed care. So we're having conversations that are very vulnerable, but we're being very respectful and we're being very mindful. And I think that's really important for a lot of these populations that are struggling maybe a little bit more than others to seek mental health services for fear of being judged or fear of getting the door closed on them.
Anybody in the audience who might want to ask questions, just raise your hand, and my colleague Bill Pitchcolin from El Paso Matters has a microphone, and he'll move around. So Bill, go ahead. And if you could introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Joe Strelitz. I've got a couple of questions and one observation. I work in the healthcare arena in what I do. And it's Alice or Allison? Alice. Okay, bad with names, good with faces. Alice, yours and your mother's story is a wonderful story. And in my experience, there's not enough great stories in the arena of mental health. There are a lot of great stories, but there's never going to be enough. And I would encourage you and your mom to get out there and give your message. You know, maybe even reach out to PTA groups at different high schools, because you're an excellent speaker. You're both of you, and I've really appreciated hearing your story, which is, you don't appear to be having a real hard time telling it, but I think everybody that has this story, it's difficult to tell, and you have overcome that extraordinarily well. So I would just say, you know, you are someone who can make an impact in this arena, and I would encourage you, you know, you've already done a lot, but if you can do more, that would be awesome for a lot of people, I think. And then for the young lady from EHN, two questions for you. So as a parent, when you go and see a therapist with your child, or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, it's a little different experience, I think. We're all, as parents, used to going and talking to our child's pediatrician, and they tell us everything. But when you want to talk to a mental health practitioner, they don't tell you very much. And it is because they're not allowed to, unless your child is threatening harm to themselves or others. That's the way I understand it. What tips might you have to parents who are dealing with that, and how should they try to work their way around that?
I think that by maybe having the conversation, so like what we were talking about with Alice going home and talking to her mom about her session, I think if a parent is interested or wanting to know more, I think first and foremost, start off with talking to your teen about it, and maybe talking to your teen and saying, hey, you know what, I'm really interested in learning more about what you're talking about in regards to sleeping with your therapist. Do you mind if maybe I sit in the first 15 minutes of your session, and maybe you and your therapist can kind of just update me on some of the things you're doing? So sometimes when you're asking questions, it's not asking questions about your child in front of your child. Have a collaborative conversation. Say, hey, can we do this together? Ask for permission. You know, of course, depending on the age of the, you know, your child, but ask for permission. Say, hey, is it okay if I sit in first 15 minutes? Hey, you know what, I'm thinking about, let's talk about these topics in our next family session. How do you feel about that? So I think if you have the buy-in from your child on wanting to get more information, say, yeah, you know what, let's talk to my therapist. You know, it's cool that you're curious about that. So yeah, I would be okay with that. You know, I think starting there before you just walk into your child's therapist's office and says, tell me what you talked about last session right now, because I'm the mom. It's not going to work. It's you know, because, and especially if your kid's there and they're seeing that, they're like, whoa, that's a little threatening. So make it collaborative, make it interesting. Say, hey, I want to show curiosity. I want to know more about this. Is it okay if we talk about it together?
Julie, anything as a provider that you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, I think there's a level of respect that respect for your child, respect for their story, their time, and like Alice mentioned before, to be able to trust, that's huge. And you have to work and grow that trust and that relationship to be able to have those difficult conversations.
Thank you. Next question.
Can Alice tell us about what specific triggers did she observe in her environment? What kind of specific forces? We're talking about affliction in teenagers, but obviously we all know that it all extends even to adults. For example, now we even have inflation, we even have political division, and that's even for us in the adult world, that some of us could handle it, depending on your economic condition. It's going to be very stressful. very anxious and you're going to avoid, but since you're already alone, you don't have no parents, no more, no one's going to talk about the adults. But for her, in the arena of the kids and at school, I want to know what kind of specific triggers affected her mind, her emotions. Because we're a society that doesn't put attention to the self, which is repress, suppression, work, Facebook, sell more. So I want to know what's going on in her mind. What really affected her emotions? What did she see?
Yeah. So great question. I want to make sure you are comfortable answering it. And I think obviously acknowledging that everybody's different and everybody has different stressors. But yeah, we'd talk. Yeah.
So I had a lot of triggers, but one of the main ones was when people talk to me like directly. I hate it when people talk to me, like, especially because of the mental state that I was in. I didn't like anybody talking to me. I didn't want anybody talking to me. And so when I went to therapy or when I went to talk to my mom or like she talked to me a lot, I hated that so much. I just wanted someone to just stop talking. That was like my main trigger.
Introvert kind of orientation, because there's like the extrovert wants to talk a lot, but the introvert's like the more in the right brain, the imaginative, the feelings.
Yeah. So I'd like to ask Gisela then. Did you recognize Alice's triggers? Did you know what made her feel uncomfortable? And then, so how would you handle that?
Sí, cuando algo empieza ella que empieza a tener mucha ansiedad o que le está molestando, ya puedo reconocer yo lo que a ella le afecta. Por ejemplo, como ella dice, si alguien le está hablando mucho, empieza a sentirse como muy ansiosa. Si ve a alguien peleando, empieza también como que le da mucha ansiedad. Si por ejemplo ella se siente muy cansada o hay mucha gente alrededor, también. Entonces ya la agarro yo, le digo, ok, cálmate, vamos a hacer ejercicios de respiración, vamos a caminar, vamos a salirnos de aquí, y ya ella empieza a sentirse mejor.
Yeah, so she says that she knows her daughter, and so she can tell the signals, she can tell her body, how she reacts, and that she knows when somebody's talking too much, or she knows when things are not going right with her and she's getting that anxiety. And so she says that she knows now what helps her as well, so she can take her and say, come on, let's go, let's breathe, let's calm ourselves down, let's go take a walk. And so Mom is doing coping skills for Alice, and together they've made this incredible bond to help each other.
So without going into the details of their case, I mean, just for both you and Krista, how do you make that happen? How do you go from that crisis point to recognizing triggers and being able to talk about it?
Well, I think awareness in everything is very key to getting well. And so having awareness of your thoughts and how thoughts relate to your feelings, your emotions, your body sensations, and then, how it makes you react or respond to your stimuli. So I think, using that alone is really important, and I think we're very persistent with trying to have Alice recognize any of those things that may have been affecting her. And she definitely knows now what those things are. And I think that is key.
I think something else too that's important to add is the great things that Alice and her mom have done and the wonderful coping skills and things. It takes time. So a lot of times we experience parents coming in and it's like they're already at level 10. They're like, please just have my child not have any more anger outbursts. And it's like, so I can't like sprinkle something on and just hope that the anger goes away. And that's a really hard truth, I think, for some parents to hear. And it's knowing that, and I think, she said it really well, is persistence. So it's going to take time. It's going to take sitting down, talking about, again, right, what coping skills did you learn? And trial and error. Like the first time you do things may not work. Second time may not work. But guess what? Fourth, fifth time, it may work little by little. So if we tend to say, oh, you know what? Deep breathing, when I feel anxious, it doesn't work, I'm done. Well, try it again. right? But if you have the mentality of like, well, no, it should already be working, this should help me not be angry anymore, then you're gonna have a really long road ahead of you. But I think that's really hard to see and feel when you're at a point in crisis. So it's also really important to understand that if you're at a point of crisis, and crisis looks different for everybody, that coping skills are gonna look different. So the same coping skills that maybe you use every day when you feel anxious may not be the same coping skills you use when you're in a heightened state or a crisis. And that takes a lot of awareness. It takes a lot of persistence, and just not giving up and knowing that there's going to be something else on the other side.
Question up here.
Hi. First, thank you so much for sharing your story. I definitely struggled with mental health stuff when I was younger, and I think when I was your age, if I had heard this story, like, wow, that would have been a huge, huge deal. I find myself some of the traits you guys talked about parents getting like really concerned or overly worried. I definitely have that for my younger sister, but I'm trying to play it cool, be the cool older sister, not too much. I also work in advertising, so I'm hyper aware of how much social media and the internet is just kind of chaotic for young people right now, myself included. So just curious, like, how you stay calm, don't jump the gun, don't ask too many questions, kind of play it cool to offer a more supportive dynamic versus like, any kind of pressure on somebody like your younger sibling.
Yeah, so I think having more of the conversations, but also like letting the other person know where you're coming from. So it's like letting them know, hey, sometimes I might come off a little, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? But it's because I love you. So sitting down and help me understand, like, how come you posted this thing on Instagram? Like, it worries me because it's out of your character, and it just doesn't seem like it's fitting for you. So coming at it from a more curiosity rather than, oh my, like you said, panicking, oh my gosh, is everything okay? It's like, hey, well, how come you did this? And it could be, well, I did it because my friends were doing it. Or I did it because I was just really bored and I just decided to post it and I deleted it 5 minutes later. So I think by just kind of sitting down and not trying to jump to conclusions and just, ask and try to have that casual conversation. Like, well, is anything going on? Like, do you want to talk about something? And sometimes changing up the environment can help. So if you tend to do it maybe, at home, at night, on the weekends, maybe go somewhere else. Go somewhere that's different. Change up the scenery a little bit. Sometimes that can get our brain also working in different ways, and it can kind of just spark the conversation in a different context. And you might get some more information.
I want to add, I think that trust, that bond, the sharing, the listening without judgment, without criticism is really important. And just, maybe you sharing part of yourself with your sister. I think that always kind of takes down those barriers that we have naturally. And so just sharing and being honest and being open and keeping that line of communication without judgment.
Alice, I wanted to ask you that there was a mention of social media, which, obviously, back in my day, we barely had color television, didn't have to deal with that. So there are a lot of influences on your life, right? You have family, friends, and then the reality of social media. Did social media complicate things for you, or were you not that engaged in social media? How did that work for you?
I feel like it really did complicate things a lot for me because I saw people that were happy when I was sad. I saw people that were having the best time of their lives traveling when I was in my room crying. So it definitely did influence me a lot. But later I understood that this is me and this is who I am, and maybe they went through, I don't know what they went through, but maybe they went through something hard at their time, but this is my time, and this is why I'm going through something. That's the reason why this is happening to me. So I feel like, so anyone goes through anything, but at that time, I was going through that. And now I understand that it's okay, and yeah.
So, Krista and Julie, how should students and parents sort of factor in social media here and be aware. Alice mentioned, just something simple as other people having a great time while I'm not feeling good. And then we have other issues out there. People on social media can be kind of mean and all of that. So how do parents and children work together on social media as part of this effort to be healthy?
Social media is the devil.
I was gonna say, don't get me started because you take this one now.
Oh, Lord. So it is like so problematic, especially to a developing mind, a developing person. We have problems of, comparing ourselves to others, seeing somebody, we don't know that they took 50 pictures to get one that has a filter and it's not real, but we don't know that it's not real. So we compare ourselves. We have that idea of perfectionism because there are filters, because we can't see what's real and what's not real and what's really real. So social media is very difficult because people only post what they want you to see. We have very few people. Now we see a lot of people talking about mental health. We see a lot of posts on social media about things that are, more awareness, but we don't always see that. We see the room that's perfect. If the person just turned around and was real with us, we would see that the other half of the room is a mess. So we have to really take social media with a huge variance of reality check. And I think it's really hard for young people. It's really hard. I love that they're talking about, not allowing social media for children that are young and whatnot. I love that conversation because I think it is something that's very hard for them to understand.
An unpopular opinion is to restrict internet time. So there are Wi-Fi apps and things where you can say, guess what, all electronics off at 9 p.m. Another suggestion that I always love to give for restricting social media internet, no kid needs to sleep with their cell phone in their bedroom. Nobody needs their school laptop. Nobody needs their iPad. I always recommend all those things should be in one area, ideally the parent's bedroom. So that way we can give our kids the chance of not being up and looking at Instagram till 3 a.m. But a lot of it has to come, I think, collaboratively between the child and the parent. And sometimes in those scenarios, the parents are going to have to kind of step in and say, hey, you know what? I know you love being on Instagram for 5 hours after school, but let's talk about why I want to limit it also. I think that's a really big, important piece of any time we have a conversation with a child where we know it may not go very well. Provide the why. So don't just say, no, I'm going to shut off internet at 9 p.m. Well, talk to them about the reasons why. Maybe pull up YouTube and show them if you can't explain it in a way that you feel can be helpful to them. But let them know why. Like, hey, those pictures that you're liking, I see you liking it because I follow you on Instagram too. Like, those are not real. Like, let's talk about why they're not real. But I think, again, kind of having the conversation, setting some boundaries, and trying to do that as early on as possible can really decrease the chances of having problematic issues with social media and internet in general later on.
Okay, that's going to bring our evening together to a close. I do want to leave with a couple of words. Emergence Health Network is our community's main provider. If you're watching us from home and you feel a need for help, just Google Emergence Health Network. You can get connected to services. I think one of the things that we've learned from the conversation today is that it takes a lot of courage to have the kinds of conversations that Gisela and Alice had, but it is possible to have those conversations, and it is possible to make those conversations work. And I leave here tonight just so impressed with Alice and Gisela. You are an inspiration to all of us. And Krista and Julie, thank you so much for the help that you provide the young people in our community. One final note of thanks to our sponsors, Emergence Health Network, El Paso Community College, and the Socorro Independent School District. There are a lot of people out there that care deeply about these challenges that we're facing. It's so great, as Mr. Strelitz said, to be able to highlight a good story out of this. And I'm not going to put pressure on you and tell you to go tell your story everywhere. You can go to school and just be a normal kid. But it is great that we're able to share this. It's great that Emergence has that video to share, to get that message out there. And it's not easy. I think that's one thing that both of you made clear, but the journey is worthwhile, especially if you can do it together. So thank both of you so much for being honest and candid, and you've really done a lot of good here today. So thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us tonight.
We have
Bill,
some.
you have some-
We have some parting gifts for our guests for their courage for bringing here. You'll notice there are 4 little plants on the table there.